We are here for Lunch Bites, going over assessments. And we have Steve Dowell here to walk us through it all. So Steve, it is all yours.
Well, thank you, Maggie. This is fun for me. I hope it will be helpful to you, but I appreciate everybody showing up. I know you're at this point eating and enjoying a good lunch, but maybe we can add to that lunch with some information today about assessment. Our assessment system that we use is about 4 years old now at the institution. I haven't been around that long, but some of you have. And yet, even if you've used it several times, chances are you don't use it every day. And so what we're going to try to do today is talk about maybe some things, some features that we haven't used before, and also talk about some recent changes that have occurred. So that's kind of the plan this morning, at Lunch Bites, to talk about what's new to the system, some of the lesser known features. Then we'll get into a little bit about what makes a good quality assessment report, and then what happens to your assessment reports. I do have kind of a bonus topic right at the end that if we have time, I'll throw that in as well, kind of a hot assessment topic that I thought I'd bring in today if we have some time. By the way, I'm not going to go through all the nuts and bolts of how to use the system. I'm assuming that most of us probably know and have done it before. But I do training. So if there are things about how to use the system that you really wanted to hear today that are not covered, by all means, let me know, and we can do a one-on-one and I can walk you through things that we didn't talk about. I want to start with a little pop quiz. Last semester, at the beginning of the semester, I did some discussion with faculty, and I said assessment really boils down to a two-word phrase, and that sums up why we do it. Why is assessment important? And the two-word phrase was continuous blank. Can anybody unmute and fill in the blank?
Progress?
That's close. That's not the word.
Improvement?
Improvement is the word. Carrie, thank you. You get the prize. Well, I don't have a prize, sorry. Continuous improvement is the goal for all of our assessment work. And why is that important? That's because education is a moving target. Our students are constantly changing, our fields are constantly changing, and learning itself, we've decided, is a lifelong pursuit. And so in that same spirit, we can't get satisfied with where we are. We have to continually improve, and that's what our assessment work is supposed to be about. It should lead us down that path. Now, in that spirit, even our assessment activities, the system that we're using can use continuous improvement. So we have looked at some things recently that we thought could be made better about our assessment system, and we've made some improvements that you're going to see this semester if you haven't already seen them. And so I'm going to touch bases on that. I mentioned it the other day in faculty meeting. I'll touch on it again today. When I got to Neosho County as a new person and starting to use the assessment system myself, I found myself asking questions that I didn't think were answered very well with the product in front of me, that there were some things I wanted to know that I didn't answer very well. And then as the guy who was reading the assessment reports, I figured out that there are other people on campus that really don't know what they're doing, because we're getting answers that are kind of crazy in some places and could be stronger, but it's because we're not asking the right questions, or maybe phrasing it in ways, or providing the tools for people to understand what they should be doing. And so my assessment was this report that we all fill out needs some better instructions. And Dr. Rob, when I talked to her, she agreed that it could use some improvement. It turns out it was kind of a challenging thing to do. We're working with Genzabar, and it's a custom product. And so it was kind of involved to get it changed over and make some changes to it. And Maggie worked with us on that, and we finally made these improvements. Let me stress that we've not made any changes to the content of the report itself. So the same information is being collected. We've just changed some of the instructions that are available to you. So let me share with you some things that I'd like you to see. And I think everybody can see my screen, right, Maggie? Okay. So we've got some new instructions here. It says complete each outcome page as well as the section report page. Submit your report by finalizing each outcome page and then the section report. None of that language was there before. You were just supposed to know that I'm supposed to go through each one of these outcome pages and finalize them. And then I come back to the section report and finalize that. So there's a little bit of language there to help you with that. But then we've added this, the instructor's guide. Now that guide has been available a long time. It just wasn't linked to assessment. So now it is. And when you click on that link, you get this long document that really talks in detail about writing assessment reports and how to use the system and so forth. And that's available to our faculty. So we've added those tools. Let me skip down to the section report. We've got some language changes down here. These questions were asked, but with some different language, and then we didn't have any bold headings on these. So this is the one about reflecting on recent improvements, additional resources, significant circumstances that affect your outcomes, and recommendations. Same 4 questions, just phrased a little differently. And then also we have some changes to the outcome page itself. By the way, please interrupt and ask questions if I'm going too fast on something. The narrative, just said narrative before. It didn't tell any instructions on what to write. So now it says reflect on the data for this outcome and consider ways that you might improve student learning, because assessment's all about continuous improvement. And that's what we're wanting to see, that content in these reports. For more information on writing narratives, please review the outcome narratives writing prompts. So that link opens up a page that looks like this. And it's not very long, just 1 page, but it gives fuller information on what you might write about as a faculty member when you're thinking about your outcomes. And I want to go down through that language with you a little bit and discuss what's here. Understanding that these are just prompts. You're not expected to answer every question that's on this page. And some outcomes, maybe you won't have particular answers on some of these questions, or it doesn't relate to the outcome because things are going so well for that outcome. So we are just providing some thought questions here for faculty to think about as they're developing and figuring out what continuous improvement could I have. So the 2 big areas here are always discuss the assessment data, reflect on the meaning and quality of the data, use the following questions to help you select and document your most important observations. So these are some things you could think about. What's your interpretation? I'm going to blow this up a little bit bigger because I see some people straining maybe to see the screen. What's your interpretation of the outcome score? That's a really important one to think, what do these numbers mean? What do they mean to you? Is the score consistent with other outcome scores within this course? How does outcome 1 compare to outcome 3, 4, 5, whatever? Is the score consistent with data that you've seen in other sections or other semesters? Maybe you taught this course for several years. Is the score going up, going down? What's the trend there? Is it consistent with your general observations about the learning achieved by your students? So you see them in class or see their homework assignments. Maybe the score is telling you one thing, but what you saw in class is something else. That would be worth noting and reflecting on. Does this outcome meet the target mean? We'll come back to that one. Are the assignments linked to this outcome adequate to paint a complete picture of the student learning? Maybe I've only got 1 assignment in the whole class that connects to outcome 3. Do I need some more to really give a fuller picture of this outcome? How have you used the data mid-course to shape your teaching and to improve student learning? This is a big one for Dr. Robb. She intended this system, as she and others were developing it, to be something that would help not only future students, not only the next time you teach the course, but also your present students. So as you're working through a course and you're halfway through, if outcome 4 is at a 50%, there may be things you can do right now to help those students and to turn things around, some changes, some improvements you could make to improve things. And so this is a good one to think about. We kind of think about assessment at the end of the course when those reports are due, but that's not really the intent. It's something we should consult fairly regularly and come back to, look at the scores and see what we can do now for the students who may be struggling in certain areas and certain outcomes. All right, so that's the first big thing, is just thinking about the numbers, what do they mean? And then the other thing, as appropriate, use the narrative to engage in continuous improvement. Consider ways that you might strengthen student learning, even if this outcome score exceeds the target mean. Let me talk about targets for just a little bit. Our target scores on this campus, I'm going to be upfront with you, are a little bit self-defeating. And here's what I mean by that. Over 80% of our course outcomes meet the target. Over 80% of our course outcomes meet our means for those outcomes are meeting the targets. Well, whenever an instructor sees that I'm meeting my targets, what happens? They forget about continuous improvement, right? There's nothing to improve. It's well, I've met the target. Most of our goals are set at 70%. That's our target. Well, understand that if you've got a target of 70%, that means half of your students can be making D's and F's, if the other half are making the A's and B's, because that can get you to the 70 that you're shooting for. And that's not really the best picture. We don't necessarily want to see half of our students making D's and F's. So our targets are not challenging us enough, I don't think, to say, hey, what could be better? How can I reach these students that are not performing as well? And we've seen, since I've been here, several programs working to increase from those 70, 75%, raising that even up to 80 or higher because of their program needs, and that's a good thing. But all of us should use the targets as just really one way to look at our data. Certainly, if you've got an outcome that's below the target, that kind of reveals to you something immediately that maybe you can work on and improve, and that helps you define the continuous improvement that you're looking for. But if all your outcomes are above the target, you should still be thinking about continuous improvement, because that's the whole goal of assessment. So maybe you're going to think about the lowest of my outcomes. They're all meeting the target, but of the 5 outcomes, I've got one that is a little bit lower than the others. Maybe that's the one I'm going to focus on for continuous improvement. Or maybe you'll think about the students, the individuals in the class who didn't do as well as the rest of the class. What could I have done or do to reach those individuals, and what could I do next time that maybe would help that particular situation improve? Maybe that will give you some ideas then for continuous improvement. So I just wanted to mention that about the target scores. It says, I'm looking back at the handout here of the PDF. While you may not have ideas for improving every outcome, somewhere in your assessment narratives, you should include at least one meaningful idea for improving this course. So again, I want to stress, if you've got 10 outcomes, we're not looking for a brilliant idea for each one of those outcomes, unless you have brilliant ideas for each one. But look for a way to make this course better somewhere in those narratives and in your report. Here's some questions to help you. Should the course content linked to this outcome be expanded or updated? Another thought question, what new teaching methods might be employed to strengthen this outcome? What should be done to help students who struggled with the outcome? What were some of the least successful assignments linked to the outcome, and how might they be revised? Should the target mean be revised? Of course, that's something that you can, as an individual, do. You'd go through the curriculum process to change that target, but it's something you might propose if you feel it's too low or too high. How are my conclusions supported by the outcomes data? So if you're going to come up with ideas for improving the course, it's always great if you can say, I'm doing this because the data shows me X, Y, Z. and link it to what you're seeing in the data itself. So I hope that's helpful to you. It's just, again, thought questions to help you with the writing. You're to choose what is most important and salient for your course, and that's what you should write about. Don't make this a checklist where you got to answer every question. With that, I'd like to move into a discussion about some of the lesser known features. And again, interrupt me if you have questions, but I'm going to move on from a discussion of the newer features that have come across. Here's one thing I wanted to point out to you. I've had recently or heard from faculty occasionally that say, I can't access my old assessment reports. And I don't think that to be the case. There is an exception to that, but let me share with you what I think may be helpful to some. If you go to my teaching in all my courses, your current courses are listed here, but if you switch this to past courses, then you'll be able to look at past semesters, and you can pull up those old courses and look at old assessment results, data, and assessment reports, and so forth. Now, the exception to that would be if your course, the course you're looking at, has undergone some sort of outcome changes. When those changes occur and we enter those changes into the assessment system, that can cause a loss of data from these historical files that you're seeing here. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get the data. It just means it may not be readily available like I'm showing you here on this screen. So if you come across a situation like that where I'm looking at an old course, but the data is missing, you might give me a call or send me a message, and I can probably retrieve it for you from some spreadsheets that we have. But that may be helpful to you if you'd like to look back at old courses. Then I'm going to go to this course and talk about some other features. One thing I'd like to point out, now we're on the assessment page, and the particular page that I've got pulled up is the one that is the view the outcome means for this section. Remember, there are 4 options on the assessment page. This one is the one that's view outcome means for the section. Let me show you again the menu. And I have these already set up, so we'll avoid some delays here by clicking on this. But this is the one I'm on in this other course. Excuse me. Couple things I'll note, wherever you see these blue icons, these eyes, if you'll hover over that, that will tell you what the outcome language is. So outcome 1 in this case is identify the specifications and configurations of computer hardware. And you know, rather than just see outcome 5 and not remember which one that is, you can hover over this and see the language, which is kind of a nice feature. It was turned off for a little while, and we had to contact Jen Zabar and get this feature reactivated. So it's here now. This is important. I mentioned this last Friday in faculty meeting, but I want to stress it again here. The update outcome cache. This button appears on this page and also on the page that says view outcome mean for students. Either place will do the same thing. Certain activities within the assessment system will trigger kind of an update to the data. But it's possible for you to enter grades and for those grades not to be reflected in the tables that are showing here on this page because it hasn't updated. So the new habit that I asked every faculty member to form last Friday is to go to one of these 2 pages here, one of these 2 table pages, and click on that button that says Update Outcome Cache. And to do that, every time you submit an assessment report, before you finalize that report, to come in and update the cache. Now, one thing you can do is to come to this page that I'm showing you, the one that's for the entire section, and click on it. But even before you click on it, you can look in this column that says mean last updated. And if that's not today and not today's time, then you know I need to do this. I need to to update this and get the numbers updated so that you make sure you have the latest calculations, because those are the calculations that are going to come to us from your assessments. And we had some situations where there were some squirrely numbers, and we noticed them as we were going through reports. And then we realized as we look back in the files that this is what had happened. The faculty member turned in the assessment report, but had not updated the cache. And that's why the numbers were out of whack. And now we can fix that. I can go back in and we can unfinalize, refinalize, and so forth. We can fix the problem, but it means number one, we got to catch it, and it's kind of tricky to catch. And then number two, it's kind of tedious to go back in all those files and fix them. So I really, really need faculty to go and make a habit of coming to these pages, update the cache, and then write your assessment report and submit it right at the same time. Any questions on that before I move on?
Yeah, on the update account cache,
Yes.
is that if you do it in one of the sections, it does it for the whole outcome
No.
assessment?
No,
So
it
you have
will
to go
only do
to
it.
each
Correct.
one?
Yes. So just like we turn in an assessment report for each section, we have to do the update the cache for each section before we turn in that report. So thank you. Any other questions? By the way, on this page that we're looking at, it shows an ungraded column. Before you turn in your assessment report, that should all be zeros. Because if you've got ungraded assignments that are linked to an outcome, then that's a problem for your students and problem for the numbers. So we'd like for all of that to be zeros. Now, it's possible you've got old assignments that you don't use anymore that are still linked to an outcome, and that could suggest to you maybe I need to unlink some things in that case, but that should all be zeros. Now I'm going to go to this page. And I'd like to talk to you about this feature, which you may have used before, may not have used before. We can link outcome or link assignments to outcomes in a couple different places. You can go on the coursework page and do it from there, but it can also be done from this page that I just pulled up, where we can do it from the link coursework page. Here I'm on the assessment tab. Remember that when we do that, we've got to select which outcome we want to work on. So for this demonstration, I'm going to pull up outcome 3. And then I want to see all the assignments. So I'm going to start at the bottom and kind of show all these pages. I just find it saves scrolling if I start from the bottom. Now all the assignments that are in this course are showing up for me. And all these blue check marks, if you haven't used this before, all these blue check marks are the things that are already linked to outcome 3. I've already done that. If I want to make changes though, I can link and unlink things just right here. And I don't have to open up those assignments individually. I can do it kind of globally for the whole outcome. And that's a quick way to do that. Of course, whatever changes I make, I want to scroll to the bottom and make sure I save those changes after I've clicked on those various changes. I'll mention, by the way, extra credit is not a friend to the assessment system. I said something about this in faculty meeting on Friday. So we have occasionally seen some course assessment numbers that come back to us and, hey, this outcome's got 150%. And why was that? Because some faculty member has tied a course assignment to this assessment outcome, and the assignment had some extra credit involved in it. So really the best thing to do is, number one, don't put anything connected to extra credit in the assessment linking, but also you can separate those two. If you want to do some extra credit, maybe have your assignment score and then a separate assignment for the extra credit part of that, and have a separate score. So you link one of those things and don't link the other, and that would help us keep out those crazy numbers that throw things off. because these numbers feed into our program review and a lot of other places, we need to watch the numbers and make them as valid as possible. While I'm here, I want to mention partial linking. And this is a feature that I think maybe not everybody knows about or has used. So down here, we have an assignment. I hope you can see it. I'll blow it up just a little bit bigger. It's called What is Theater? This assignment is graded with a rubric. And down below that title, you've got 5 options here that all have these little arrows in front of them. Those are the lines of the rubric. The title of each line of that rubric is shown there, criterion, the different criteria that are a part of this rubric. And so as it is currently linked, this whole assignment feeds into outcome 3. But if I decided really only this one part of the rubric is connected to outcome 3, then I can do that, or I could say 2 of the lines are connected to outcome 3. And I could link it that way, and that way only the part of the score for the assignment that relates to those 2 lines of the rubric would count for this outcome. If I want the whole thing, then I can unlink these and just focus on the main title. Same thing can be done with a test. If your test has several sections to it, you can take a section of a test and only link that one part of the test to an outcome. And that's a pretty handy feature if you'd like to do that. I want to look at weighting, another feature that may not be used by very many people, but could be valuable to you. So currently, when you connect several assignments to an outcome, they are all weighed the same. In other words, if you've got a 10-point homework assignment and a 100-point exam, and students get an 80% on one and a 75% on the other, those 2 scores, that 75 and that 80, are strictly averaged. They're put together and averaged. But you as a faculty member may say, hey, that 100-point exam is worth a lot more. It means a lot more to the outcome than that 10-point homework assignment. And in that case, you may want to weight the assignments. Now, this has nothing to do with how the students are graded. This is only weighting for the assessment system. But if you want to show in the assessments that one assignment weighs more than the other, then you can do that here. You cannot do this from the coursework page. So if you're used to linking things and unlinking things from the coursework page, you won't do it, you won't be able to weight them there. This really has to be done after you've got all your assignments linked to the outcome. So I came over to outcome 4 because it only has 4 things linked to it. And you see the blue items there. When I do the weighting, I have to change this weight type to custom. So it said none before, but now it says custom. And it gives me a little box over here next to the assignments. And I can take those 4 assignments that I have checked and give them a weight. So here's a quiz. If I want to make that 40% of the assessment score, I can do that. If I scroll on down and I have a small homework assignment, here's 10 points for that one, or 10% weight, and then 25% here and 25% here. What does that add up to? 100%. In order for this to work, I have to have 100%. And so that's why I have to have everything linked ahead of time, because I'm going to choose how much of the pie each one of those assignments gets. They're all going to add up to 100%, but how much do I want this one to weigh against the others? And so I've given it 100%. Once I do that, I can save those changes and it will take it. If I save something that doesn't add up to 100%, it'll tell you that it didn't match. It'll give you an error. So it didn't work out. But that can be a good way if you have many assignments tied to your outcomes and some are worth more to others. it could be something that you could use and benefit from. I would just encourage you to experiment with this. Maybe do it without the weighting and see what the score looks like, and then compare it when you do add the weighting, and see what that looks like, and whether that will be beneficial to you. Do we have questions on any of that?
Steve, this is Kyle.
Kyle.
Is that independent of the gradebook weighting then? You could weight your
Yes.
assessment differently than your gradebook?
Yes, this has no bearing on the student score. This is only having to do with your outcome score, what that's going to look like. But the weighting that you give it in the grade book may be something that informs you when you select your weighting for the assignments in the assessment. Okay. All right, I'll move on to the assessment report. And I want to start by telling you what happens to your assessment reports, in case you have wondered about that. They come to me, but they don't stay strictly with me. I read through them, and that's part of my duties here at the institution. And part of what I'm doing is making sure that we get the reports. That's part of my job, is to make sure the reports are coming in and faculty are doing what they should be doing. But I'm also reading through them to look for items that may need some additional attention in one way or the other. If you express a challenge in your report that could only be addressed by somebody other than you, say an administrator needs to take a look at this, then I want to make sure that that administrator gets that information. And so one thing I do is flag items as I'm scrolling through and reading these assessment reports, flag items that may need a follow-up in one way or the other. And I'll attach a name to that particular item and say it's might be your supervisor for online courses. Marie's name goes on them because she's in charge of the online world. Andrew and Kyle, I'll put their names on things that may relate to advising, and try to get that information to them. So it varies with what the item is and what you give to me. But then I flag those things, attach a name to it, and send out reports. So Kyle gets all the advising things, Marie gets all the online things, and various supervisors get their instructors' items. And I also send a full report to Dr. Rob, so she sees a list of everybody's flagged items. It's usually over 100 pages of information that she receives. This semester, as I looked back on the fall reports, I was able to get that set of reports out to the supervisors and so forth in March. So that went out to shows you how long it takes to get through all that and to sort through the flagged items. I'm trying to get better at that and make it even faster. I'd really like to get it done in January from the fall semester. But as we get more familiar with the process and streamline some things, I think that will get faster over time. I did want to look at the assessment report itself. So I'm going to come over here. Remember that when you come to the assessment report, make sure you update the cache first. So the first stop is to go to those tables, look at the numbers, think about those. Now, those top two options there, update the cache while you're there, and then come to this page that we're talking about, the outcome assessment report. Now, we've gone through the changes in the directions, but I'd like to highlight a few other things here as we go through. Oh, by the way, I'm going to click on it here, so maybe it'll, while I'm explaining, it'll get done. It takes a second, as you know, for these tables to load, and I already clicked out of it, so that was a bad thing I did. But I'm going to let it give me another set of scores. One thing I heard from folks not long ago is that they used to be able to look back on their past data and actually had copies of their own data, and that they liked having it in a spreadsheet. And I communicated back that you can actually take the tables that are in MyNeoshow and take them over to a spreadsheet. And it's a pretty simple process to do that. And then you've got your past data. If you want to preserve it that way, you can put it in a spreadsheet and save it. And of course, the circle is just going around and around. So I'm going to let it keep working while I talk through. Let me go over to I'll show you that in a minute, how you can take that information over to a table. All right, the assessment report. Now it looks like you did it. So here's my assessment data, my table. I can copy all that and just paste it. And there's a nice table, has all your information, your name of your students and their scores and so forth. And if you want that historical information, you can save your own tables that way. Pretty simple to do. Okay. Of course, we made a change last semester that no longer are faculty required to write a report on each one of their sections. When I got here, I found a lot of assessment was not good assessment. We were doing a lot of activity, but it wasn't necessarily leading toward continuous improvement. And so I talked to Dr. Rob. Hey, Dr. Rob, here's what I'm seeing. Here's my assessment of the situation. Could we make some changes? And she agreed to give this a try. And so we went to 2 assigned reports for full-time faculty, 1 assigned report for part-time faculty. If you teach in the summer and winter sessions, you'll also have a report in each one of those if you're teaching those times. Maggie has taken the step of giving us a tag on the end of the assessment page, a tab that says Spring 2021 to help us identify which ones do I have to write reports for. Remember that you have to turn in a report for every section, but you only have to write a report for the ones that are assigned. And so the ones that are not assigned, you can just kind of fill in the fields as you go through them. Some of these fields are required. You can't finalize without putting some information in. So I've told you that you can simply say NC, and the abbreviation for our college, and write an NC in there and finalize that. If it's not a assigned report, you can do it that way and then finalize and move on. Just make sure you go ahead and finalize the full report for those that are not assigned to you. But the ones that are assigned, then you'll have some reflection to do. And hopefully that will, by having only 2 reports to write, if you're a full-timer, that gives you some extra time to reflect on these and do a better job, not just copying and pasting from one field to the next. We've discussed the outcome page already. Let me mention, be sure to finalize each page individually. I think you know that. You can write a little bit at a time in this field down here. So remember, this is a page you really ought to come to several times during the semester, not just at the end of the semester. One thing I've done is to take a look at it a few weeks in and maybe even make a plan. How can I make this better? And you can always use this like a diary of your course, how things have come so far, and then add to it and add to it. So you can save and continue without finalizing. You can just keep records, and that may save you some time at the end of the course as you're trying to finalize these things. You may not have as much that you need to write. Then the section report. Let's look at that. Most people don't use the pre and post scores, pre and post test. But if you do, this is just a way for you to document your scores for your course. If you want to have that in the report, that's fine. It would not be a bad idea if you're going to put the numbers in there to say something about them. What do they mean? And maybe in your narratives, you would have something to say about those numbers. The reflection on recent changes. Notice that in the statement here, it says, if any. If you're brand new to the college, maybe you've never taught this before, you may not have any changes to talk about. So these are not required fields. You don't necessarily have things that you'll say in every one of these fields, but if you do, that's useful. Now, I would hope that for most of us, if we've taught the course before, we are continually improving. So there should be something that we said last time we were going to try this time. Did it work? Was it effective? How effective was it? This is kind of a place for you to talk about that progress. How did things go this time around? And how does that compare to the last time? Then moving on down, additional resources. This could be things like I need a new textbook, or I need a new classroom, or I need a new projector in my classroom. It could be that the library could help support my class more if it had this or that. Whatever those things are that you need, you can record them here and know that I'm going to go through them. And this is a field that I pay a lot of attention to make sure, hey, supervisor, here's what your faculty member says they need. So use this field and let us know. Of course, if there's nothing, then you don't have to put anything there, that you can move on to other fields. By the way, I would encourage you not to stop here. If you say, I've got this big budgetary thing that I need for my class, well, it's good to put it here and to share that, but you've got budgetary channels as well at our college. You've got strategic planning channels. So maybe you're saying, I need a new facility for my course. Well, that's kind of a bigger kind of need. And we need to get that into the budget. We need to get that into the strategic plan. And so don't stop here. Don't say, I put it in that report and now I'm done. If you've got some big needs like that, make sure you're going through those channels to also voice those concerns and needs in those other ways to make sure they get heard. But I'll do my best to put them forward as well. Then there's significant circumstances. Here in this field, I'm hearing a lot this last year about COVID because these significant circumstances have affected us all. I expect maybe this spring, athletics may have a bearing on a lot of courses because we've had double the athletics activity that we've had in past spring semesters. So that may be a factor that people want to note. This is just a field that allows you to document the context for your data as you need to. And then the recommendations field, it mentions scheduling, modality, and advising. Could be that you are teaching this in the morning, but you really think it needs to be an afternoon, an evening class, that kind of thing. It's taught in one particular building. It needs to be in this other building. The modality is taught as an online course, but I think it needs to be face-to-face or virtual or whatever it is. Sometimes I hear things about advising here that before the student takes this course, they really need to know this or that. And you can mention those kinds of things, and I'll share those with our advisors. Share whatever information is appropriate for the course, and then finalize that section report. This does list the number of students that are part of your report, if that's of interest to you. Okay, a couple more things I'll share, and then again, be sure to interrupt if you have questions. Let me share some common concerns that I see with regard to these assessment reports. By the way, I've had a conversation with Dr. Robb recently, and she's asked me in the fall to be ready to share a fuller discussion of what I'm going to talk to you about now. But let me share with you kind of a preview of that fuller conversation that we'll have later. And I'm just going to share 5 quick concerns that I see in the reports, things that could be better. One is faculty who are not looking at the data, and I can tell. Now, that's not all faculty, but sometimes this happens. So sometimes the faculty simply don't discuss the numbers. So that's kind of a clue that they're not looking at the numbers, or it seems to indicate that. But then in some cases, I see them even bragging on how well my students did on this outcome, and the outcome score is really low. So either they've got a different perspective than what the numbers are showing. I've also seen, I told you that extra credit thing throws us off. So we've got this really high number, and they said nothing about this weird number that came through. So faculty are not always paying attention to the numbers. Second thing, faculty may say in their narrative, they may say the mean score was 80%. The mean score was 90%. They give me a number. Well, that number is already there. What I really need from them is the interpretation of that number. What does it mean? What does it say to them? And so some faculty in their narratives are just telling me the number, but they don't tell me anything about that number, what it means. A third thing, faculty often assume that no improvements are needed if they met their target scores. We've already kind of touched on that today, but let me say it this way. If your assessment is not leading to continuous improvement, you're not doing it right. So if you're looking at your outcomes and you're saying, I met all my targets, no improvements are needed, then you're not doing this right. Think of something that could be better. Even if your scores are pretty good, think of some ways or a way that this course could be better and try to document that as part of the report. I did a review this last time around, this last fall, through the reports. We actually checked them to see how many of the reports or what percentage of the reports included some sort of continuous improvement. And here's the percentage I came up with, 40%. Of the assessment reports that I received, only 40% had any kind of continuous improvement documented in the report. So that's something we can work on. The fourth thing, faculty often say nothing about improvement. And that kind of ties into what I was talking about above. So they may describe the challenges that they faced in the course or how well the students did generally, but they don't talk about the ways they're going to make the course better. And that's the key. That's the main thing we want to see in these reports. Then the last thing that I'll talk about today is faculty are writing the same thing in every outcome. So your outcomes are different. Your numbers are different typically. So your narratives should not all be the same. Now, I certainly don't aspire to have reports that are really long. I got to read all these reports. So making long reports is not the goal, but making thoughtful reports would be a goal. That as I look at this outcome 3, what do I see? And if you're just copying and pasting the same statement to every outcome, it kind of indicates you're not looking at each outcome on its own merits. So those would be some things I think we could work on. Checking my notes here to see if I've forgotten anything. Oh, I would also say when you propose continuous improvement in your course, be as specific as you can. When you say to improve outcome 1, I'm going to revise the questions on my chapter 3 quiz. That's a pretty specific change that you plan for your course. That's better than saying something like, I need to make some changes to assignments. That's kind of vague. So I would encourage you to be specific. Okay, do we have time for the bonus topic? I'm there. I'll keep it quick. The topic is equity in assessment. And we'll talk more about this some future time. But this is kind of a hot topic in assessment right now, and more broadly in education. Now, equity has been a concern of education for a very long time. If we think about it, financial aid is all about equity. It's making education available to everybody. And that's what we're trying to do, is make it available to the folks who may not have access to it. As applied to assessment, this topic of equity has kind of a couple major components. One has to do with how we look at the data. So there we're talking about disaggregating the data. We know what your outcomes are for your course overall, but how are your outcomes for a particular racial group or a particular economic status? And that requires kind of breaking apart those numbers. So we're not there yet as an institution. We don't provide that data. I don't have it for you, but that's kind of the direction we're going in higher education today, to think about those things and to think about improvements that may be targeting the gaps between various groups. Then the other component of this equity conversation is about how we collect the data. And this is the one that maybe has more direct and immediate relevance to you as a faculty member. there are subtle things that faculty members can do to exacerbate those gaps between groups. The example that I heard in an HLC conference this last week or so was a question on a test that referred to broccoli. Now, the course was not talking about broccoli, it wasn't teaching about broccoli, but in a test, a faculty member had referred to broccoli as some kind of an example of something. And a student in the course was from a culture that had never been exposed to broccoli, didn't know what broccoli was. And so that put that student in a position of either having to ask the question, what is broccoli, or trying to guess their way through this thing. And those kinds of things that we do as faculty members, we may not be aware of, but now there's a new concern that we pay attention to those things as best we can to narrow the gaps and avoid those situations. Additionally, equity and assessment may mean offering different types of assessment. You know how we know our students have different learning styles. They also have different ways of excelling in assessment. So maybe one student does really well at that oral presentation, another student does better at a written presentation, a written assignment, and you could go down the list all the different types of assessments we do. And so we're looking at ways in the assessment world, they're looking at ways to make those opportunities available to students. Some faculty members offer both. So on assignment A, you'll do a written assignment. On assignment B, you'll do an oral presentation as a way of leveling the playing field, if you will. Others will give students an option. Here's assignment A. If you want to, you can do it as a written assignment or as an oral presentation. I'll let you decide whatever works best for you. And so that's kind of coming down the pike, something I'm going to keep my eye on for the next couple of years and see where it goes. But I wanted to mention those ideas to you and just kind of get you thinking about equity. All right, I'm going to stop there. Do we have questions?
I have a question on the section page of the assessment. You indicated that we didn't have to answer, if any, on these questions.
So you can write, if you don't have any resources you need, you can say none and just move on.
Because as an adjunct instructor with maybe one or two courses, a lot of this, I don't feel I have any additional response, but I don't want to leave a thing blank and someone look at it and go.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm the one who added the language, if any, because I want faculty to know you don't have to come up with additional resources. If you don't have any, that's fine. There are some things that I want to hear from you. On the outcomes, I want you to write something.
Right.
But on some of these other fields, I would really like to see something on this field about recent improvements if you've taught the course before. That would be one I would encourage, but a brand new faculty member may not have anything to say there. So they could say none.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Other questions?
I have another question on the outcomes themselves. I work on my assessments as I go. And like you say, I add to them as I look at the whole course. There's two fields. You have the means, the target, and you have I think it's the means without the zeros and the means with the zeros.
Yes. Right here.
The actual mean and the actual means excluding the zeros. Well, that probably means the student didn't do the homework.
Right. So this is another piece of information for you. It's strictly information. Again, you're the interpreter of the information.
Right.
But here's what I would say about that. If you've got an actual mean that's in the 90s, or I'm saying that backwards, if it's in the 30s, and you've got an actual mean excluding zeros in the 90s, what does that tell you? It tells you a lot of students didn't do this assignment. if that's me, then I'm concerned that so many students are not doing the assignment. And I'm concerned, is there something I can do as a faculty member to improve that? Can I change the timing of that score? Could I break that assignment into smaller pieces and have them do a piece at a, one piece this week and one piece next week? Is there something I could change that might get those zeros out of there? And that may not always be the case, but that would be where my mind goes. So a lot of faculty members, they kind of jump to that mean without zeros score and kind of say, hey, look, that's good. And if they didn't choose to do it, that's on them. And I get that to some extent, but we want to think about what we can do when we can do something to make it better. And this may be a source, an idea for how to improve something.
In my narrative, because I'm an online instructor, so I know from past, I've been both class and online, and I know students are getting the information for the first time. So I try to give them resubmit, and I also indicate in my narrative that I have given the actual beginning, the original, and then the resubmit, because it's very hard in some of these courses that aren't in class, because you would be able to talk back and forth. They have to redo it to get the information for a second time. Right. So I try to put that in my narrative. So, usually if someone didn't resubmit, it sort of explains the difference between the actual and the actual without the zeros.
Yeah, that's kind of a variation on the formative approach. So in a formative assignment, you may have them practice, one math question or whatever, that they're going to practice this skill. And then on the next assignment, they're doing the whole homework page. And it gives them a chance to get their experience in a little bit before they do the big assignment. I think we're getting close on time. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I hope it's been helpful to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. If anybody has any questions or anything, you can email Steve at assessments@neosho.edu, correct?
That's right.
Or if you need to email me, you can email me at online@neosho.edu, and we'll be happy to help you. So thanks for coming, everyone.